I don't often keep up with seasonals. I prefer waiting until a show is done airing before I start it, enjoying the convenience of marathoning it to the last episode, knowing everything by the end without the weekly wait. On top of that, I end up watching very few anime from the latest season or even the entire year. The Ramparts of Ice happens to be one of those very rare exceptions. Going in, my only prior knowledge was that it was a seasonal romance, yet from the very first episode I was completely hooked. The show doesn't necessarily bring anything new to the table. It relies on a host of typical cliches you can find in almost any romance. You have the popular guy and the gloomy girl, a loose love triangle, and the classic misunderstandings that riddle the genre. Even so, the Ramparts of Ice manages to use these tropes effectively in order to tell a coming-of-age story that genuinely pulls at your heartstrings. The narrative unfolds as an exploration of how people interpret relationships, uncovering the layers of how circumstance and personal trauma shape behaviors, attitudes, and conflict. Unlike its more vibrant and comedic sister story, You and I Are Polar Opposites, written by the same author, the Ramparts of Ice takes a more dramatic and subdued approach. It opts for a slow burn narrative that keeps us guessing the dynamic between our characters. In fact, for much of its runtime, there are very few overtly romantic moments. Instead, it portrays friendship almost like a Trojan horse to progress an underlying romance that only becomes clearer by the end of the season. It's not entirely void of romance, of course, as the instances of tension between them are palpable, but at its core, this anime is ultimately a story about personal growth, healing, and maneuvering through emotions that just don't quite make sense yet. Koyuki Hiikawa, our protagonist, exhibits antisocial behaviors and maintains deeply suspicious of her peers. She puts up walls, choosing to distance herself due to persistent bullying that had occurred earlier in her life. The anime dives past this initial caricature, following Koyuki's journey as she learns to heal from those wounds while attempting to maintain friendships in spite of that. What I appreciate most about the show is how it highlights the flawed humanity of its cast, reminding us that self-improvement isn't linear. When the anime utilizes certain tropes, it does so in a way that feels genuine. Given Koyuki's reserved nature, any probe into her personal space, even with good intentions, feels suffocating, translating into intense interactions that naturally breed misunderstandings. And it's not just her reservation that causes friction. Another character, Minato, takes an early interest in getting to know her. Because his personality is strikingly different, he initially comes off a little pushy. It's like watching water and oil try to mix. Their clashing dynamics create friction where either one or both of them say something they don't mean, resulting in immediate confusion, hurt, and regret. This becomes a recurring pattern early on, showcasing the raw difficulty of communication and establishing a connection, proving that relationships are rarely straightforward. Where there is progress, there are setbacks. Growth and healing are never perfect. It's a story of perpetual improvement. The Ramparts of Ice provide space for its characters to make mistakes, not for cheap drama, but as leverage to build humility, rapport, and vulnerability. Within the span of just 14 episodes, we see the gradual development of our four main characters as we begin to understand their backstories and behavior. At times, these revelations are messy, but they provide incredibly meaningful moments given each character's unique circumstances. Miki, who is idolized by her peers, constantly maintains an image of perfection and femininity, fearing that she'll lose the adoration of those around her. Unable to freely express herself, she feels suffocated by expectations, caught in a struggle between a fabricated persona and her more authentic, brash self. Minato is popular and easily labeled as a playboy. He's the kind of person who views other people as a puzzle to be solved, finding a specific interest in social outcasts, befriending them to unlock the shackles of their heart. Whether he's aware of it or not, his actions stem from a deeper yearning of his own. Sometimes his behavior comes across as self-righteous, and his urge to keep the peace prevents him from ever saying no, as personified by a string of past relationships that he could never fully invest himself in. Youta, whose mother passed away when he was a child, often feels alienated despite having a loving relationship with his father and stepmother. On the surface, he is extremely composed and kind, a front he maintains to be the emotional rock for his younger siblings and his friends to lean on. And Koyuki, whose past consists of her parents' divorce, bullying, and manipulation, had transformed her from a carefree girl into someone who never lets her guard down. Her past becomes a shackle, preventing her from forming meaningful connections out of fear of getting hurt again. They all have distinct struggles, but at their core, they share a universal yearning for connection, a desire to break past the barrier of isolation and loneliness. While the anime tackles these heavy topics, it deals with them with immense care. Misunderstandings and adversity arise, but the most satisfying payoff is when the characters show true humility. When Koyuki realizes how she's been cold to Minato by putting up her walls and saying something hurtful, she ends up self-reflecting and apologizes to him, with tears streaking down her eyes. Or when Minato admits to his faulty idea of pity and the need to fix people, reassuring Miki that while their relationship may have begun that way, she had become an irreplaceable friend to him. When Miki finally opens up about the exhausting face she puts on for others, finding a way to be honest with her feelings while trying to preserve her precious bonds. Or when Youta reveals his family situation, admitting to the isolation and intrusive thoughts that come with adjusting to change. And the anime does a great job at rewarding the viewer with moments that highlight these new sides to our characters. Like the moments when Koyuki lets her guard down to flash an unexpected smile never fails to get a reaction out of me. They offer a sense of relief, providing hope that someone with a troubled past like Koyuki's can break through her own barriers. Reconnecting with her childhood friend Miki while befriending both Youta and Minato along the way results in an unforgettable dynamic. And as a romance, inevitably, romantic feelings arise. Because the show establishes this tight group dynamic first, it effectively uses friendship as a Trojan horse to push the underlying romance. Paired with the complex backgrounds of our leads and the inherent immaturity of adolescence, it tells a remarkably down-to-earth tale. These characters gradually notice things about each other they never had before, experiencing small, exciting emotions in each other's presence. All of a sudden, the other person looks a little cuter, kinder, and more endearing. But those feelings immediately are met with intense doubt. They confront the reality of their developing emotions, constantly weighing them against the sanctity of their friendship. If these feelings were uncovered, they fear the dynamic will be jeopardized and will never be the same again. What if it isn't reciprocated? Will they have to distance themselves? Will it be awkward? Will they even stay friends? The script really shoehorns this urge to preserve the sacredness of their bond over pursuing romantic endeavors, and as a result, the cast continuously doubt themselves, leading to inaction and a deep, quiet yearning. It's almost a little cliche, as I've seen this dichotomy explored in other shows before. However, it's still very compelling nonetheless. At an age where everything feels permanent, yet entirely unpredictable, I understand where they're coming from. I understand not wanting to take the risk, choosing to stay on the sidelines and letting those feelings fester, being content with just being friends. Because who wouldn't? The alternative means risking the loss of a valuable friendship. As seen in the last episode, this fear turns every interaction into a minefield of second guessing. You start questioning the true nature of every glance and gesture. Was there kindness born out of romantic affection or just casual politeness? Would that warmth vanish if these hidden feelings were brought to light? Ultimately, do they see you as just a close friend or something more? It's these exact, agonizing questions that elevate the Ramparts of Ice above your standard high school drama. By choosing to treat its cast not as perfect rom-com archetypes, the narrative portrays how messy growing up can be. It shows us that breaking down those walls isn't a linear process. It requires humility, a lot of patience, and the risk of getting hurt. For someone like me, who rarely keeps up with seasonals and prefers the neat resolution of a finished story, diving into this one completely blind was an incredible surprise. It reminds me that even when a show uses familiar cliches, the story told with this much genuine care and emotional honesty is always worth the wait.